Welcome to the Business of Style podcast with me, your host, Louisa Gabriel. I'm a personal stylist and image strategist who grew a successful six-figure business, and now I'm educating and empowering other personal stylists and image professionals just like you to do the same. So please keep listening to hear the lessons I've learned and the strategies I've used along the way that are guaranteed to take your personal styling career from side hustle to six figures too. Welcome back to the Business of Style, the podcast for personal stylists and image consultants who want to build a business that's not just successful, but sustainable, professional, and actually enjoyable to run. Because let's be honest, there is nothing glamorous about working with a client who drains your energy, questions your expertise, and leaves you feeling like you've completely undercharged. And yet, so many stylists end up in this situation. It's not because they're not talented. It's because they ignored the red flags at the very beginning. So today's episode is all about that. We're talking about client red flags that personal stylists should never ignore. And more importantly, I'm going to tell you how to handle them in a way that protects both your confidence and your business. So let's dive into it. Before we get into the specifics, I want to reframe something. So red flags are not about judging clients. They're not about clients being difficult or being high maintenance. What they're actually about is a pattern of behavior that tells you how someone is likely to show up in the working relationship you're going to have with them. And here's the truth. The problems that you experience later in the relationship almost always show up early. It's just usually in smaller and quieter ways. The stylist who says, I had no idea this client would be so challenging or be so difficult, usually did see the signs. They just overrode them and pushed them to one side because they wanted the booking, because they didn't want to seem difficult themselves, or because they thought it will probably be fine. So this episode is about helping you trust what you're actually seeing from day one, from contact one with a potential client, and how to respond to it in a professional way. All right, so let's start with one of the most common red flags that I see. A potential client who tries to negotiate your price before they've even worked with you. Now, on the surface, this can feel harmless and it can be very common and something that we often see. And they might say things like, is there any flexibility in your prices? Or I've seen other stylists who charge less. And it's very easy, especially when you're building your business, to feel like you should accommodate that. And it might be that you just want to get some money coming in. It doesn't matter how much at that point in time. But here's what this often signals. This is a client who does not fully value your service or your expertise. And maybe it's because they don't recognize it, but they're definitely not valuing it when they're asking for a discount. And that matters because it rarely is going to stop at the price of your services. These are often the same clients who are going to start questioning your recommendations, pushing back on your choices and your advice, or expecting more than what they've actually paid for. And that is definitely something that I have seen time and time again. They want to pay less, and they expect so much more. I see it all the time. A stylist agrees to reduce their fee, and then they end up delivering more work than they would have if they charge full price, just to prove the value of their services. And this, you know what? It's not a sustainable business model, and it's not something that you should be doing. And you may have done it and I'll hold my hands up. I have definitely done it in the past, but this is not a sustainable business model, and it's not something that we want to do. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to get very defensive, when discussing the price of your services with your clients. A simple, confident response is going to work beautifully. So something like, my pricing reflects the level of service and expertise I provide. If it's not the right fit for your budget, I completely understand. You're not closing the door to the potential relationship by saying that. What you're actually doing is you're setting a standard and setting a boundary. Okay, the next red flag, this one has become increasingly common, and a client will come to you and say something like, I already know I'm a winter because I did that quiz online, or ChatGPT told me I should be wearing these specific colors, or I saw on TikTok, this is my body type. Does any of this ring true to you? I'm sure many of you listening have heard these things before. Now, this is where nuance is important. Clients being informed is not a problem. It's a good thing. And in fact, it can actually be very helpful. But there's a difference between that curiosity and them having an attachment to unverified conclusions. So when a client is overly attached to what they've already decided, so ChatGPT told them they were the soft summer, and that's what they've become attached to, it actually can make your role really, really difficult. Because instead of guiding them, what you constantly end up doing is having to undo or justify why you're not seeing that soft summer season within them. I can remember a stylist sharing a situation with me where a client insisted that she was a cool summer, and it was all based on an online quiz that she had taken. And throughout the entire consultation, she resisted any suggestion that didn't align with that identity. And even when the draping process clearly indicated otherwise, she struggled to accept it. That becomes exhausting as a stylist or a color analyst. And it also becomes just confusing for the client and not necessarily a positive experience. So what can you do if this happens? Because it's happening more and more. Well, first of all, you don't dismiss their input. We never want to do that. But what you do is you gently reposition yourself as the expert. For example, you say something like, that's really interesting, and we can absolutely explore that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to assess everything in person so we can get a completely accurate result for you. You're acknowledging them. You're acknowledging the information that they have presented to you, but you're not giving away your authority on the topic. And let's face it, they're coming to you because you are that expert and you are that authority. All right. Red flag number 3, not asking enough questions before booking. Now, this one is often overlooked, but it is actually something that is incredibly telling. A client who books with you quickly, they just click that sign up on your website and they've not really asked you any questions, or there's not been any conversation about what they're looking for and what they need and what you can offer them. There should always be meaningful questions prior to booking the service. What is the actual process? What's included? What can they expect? How does everything work? It might seem like a dream that they're not asking you these questions, but sometimes it really is the opposite, because what this can indicate is a lack of understanding about how things are going to work. And therefore, they can often be left with unrealistic expectations that kind of creep into things much later in the process of working with them. And by then, it's kind of too late. So these are often the clients who will say things to you like, oh, I thought that was included. I had no idea that wasn't included. Or, oh, I assumed we'd be doing more than this. Is that really it? I've seen many stylists caught off guard by this, especially with services like wardrobe edits and personal shopping that can be big, lengthy services. The client hasn't fully engaged up front. So what they end up doing is they start filling in the gaps themselves and determining what they think should be happening as part of your service and the process. Those assumptions that they make don't always match up with what you are actually offering. So the solution here is really proactive clarity. Even if the client doesn't ask, you should lead that conversation. Make your process crystal clear to them. Outline what's included. Set those expectations early, because this kind of clarity is what is going to prevent conflict later on. So I always recommend you should never be booking in a client until you have had that free consultation call. Even if it's just a 10-minute call. Maybe you're doing it by messenger. Not everybody wants to talk on the phone, but there should have been that opportunity where they can ask questions. And if they don't ask questions, where you can just provide them with the information so everything is clear and the conflict doesn't show its ugly head further into the relationship. All right, red flag number 4. Excessive or boundary pushing communication. Now, sure, if you've been working with clients a while, you have probably had a client that has done this. I have had many. I have many students too, that this one definitely fits. But this is a big one. And it is one that I think many stylists really struggle to manage. And it's that client who is messaging you late at night, or they're repeatedly messaging you and they're not waiting for you to actually respond to that initial email or message, and maybe they're using different platforms to do it. They're sending DMs on Instagram. They're sending you emails. They're on WhatsApp. There's so many ways for them to try and get hold of you, but they're not having the patience, and the boundary isn't set for them to wait for you to actually make that contact back. Now, again, this doesn't automatically make them difficult, right? Sometimes people are just really enthusiastic, or sometimes we can be a little impatient when we really want to set something up. I have no patience for anything. I'm the most impatient person. And if I'm looking for an answer, I typically really want that answer quickly. But that's not how it works in life and when you're working with other people. So we do all have to have patience. And when people are just constantly messaging, reaching out, what it can indicate is a potential lack of boundaries. And if you don't set those boundaries early in the professional relationship, you'll end up managing them later after it has become more problematic. And having to deal with it later when it gets to that point is much more uncomfortable. So we want to set those boundaries from the beginning to make it easier, not only on ourselves, but on our clients too. I worked with a stylist who was a coaching client of mine, and she would share with me that a client would be sending voice notes at midnight and then be following up at 7 a.m. asking why she hadn't responded. Stylists need to sleep. Stylists need to eat. We have a life outside our business. And this particular stylist felt that pressure to reply because she didn't want to seem unprofessional, and she also didn't want to lose that client either. And I'm sure that's something that really resonates with you if you've experienced this too. But actually the opposite is true. Professionalism does include boundaries. So what does this look like in practice for your business? Well, it can be as simple as setting communication guidelines right from day one, making it clear that you respond to messages during business hours. Monday to Friday. It is something that you can set up on your email system. So you can set up an auto reply that says, thank you for your message. I will get back to you between 9 and 5, Monday to Friday. You can do auto responses on DMs on Instagram. So they don't feel that they're kind of left in the dark. They know you've got the message, but this is when you're going to get back to them. So it's kind of like just gently reinforcing it with your clients when it's needed. This doesn't make you difficult to work with as a stylist. All you're doing is you're modeling how you expect to be treated. And this is very important. And sometimes I think we often overlook in business is how we need to be treated. We focus so much on how we should be treating our clients and being professional, but we also do forget about ourselves sometimes in the picture, and we don't want to do that. So setting boundaries and being clear on your response times, when you're going to respond, how you're going to respond, it's a good thing for you, and it's also a good thing for your clients too. All right. And the final red flag is the resistance to contracts or structure. Now, this is one that you should take very seriously. And if you have a client who says something like, we don't need a contract. We could just keep it informal. That's fine. This sometimes comes from a place of not understanding, but regardless of the intention, the implication is the same. And that is that they are resistant to structure, boundaries, or formal agreements. And that can actually create a lot of risk for you as a stylist and a lot of risk for your business. Having somebody sign a contract is not about mistrust and not trusting them to pay on time and things like that. It's actually about clarity and about protection for both sides. It protects you as a stylist, but it also protects the client too. Contracts that we have, they outline what's going to be included. So that goes back to one of the other red flags, right? Making sure it's clear what is included so they know what to expect. What's not included in the specific service that they have booked with you? What are the payment terms? What are your responsibilities? What are the client's responsibilities? When somebody pushes back on something like a contract, it's really worth paying attention to, because often what it means is that they may also in the future dispute terms later on in the process after you've started working with them, or they'll start challenging those boundaries, or they'll expect flexibility beyond what was agreed. So without a contract, it's hard to really set things clear and make sure everybody is on the same page. And that's where the issues really arise. So a simple professional response, if somebody questions and says, we don't need a contract, your response is simple. I use a contract with all clients, and this is to ensure that everything is clear and runs smoothly for both of us. You don't have to over explain, and you don't need to apologize. I think sometimes in business, I know I do this. It's like, I'll apologize for actually enforcing the rules. I'll apologize for enforcing laws that, come up within my business. And we really shouldn't be apologizing those things. That actually makes us very responsible business owners. So we don't want to apologize for that. That's a good thing. Okay. And we really don't need to over explain things. It's simple. A contract is standard in our industry and is something that should be used to protect both parties involved. So those are 5 key red flags that I just wanted you to be aware of. And maybe you've experienced these, maybe you haven't yet, but it's clued you in and you'll be on the lookout for them. I want to leave you with this. Building a successful styling business isn't just about attracting clients. It's about attracting and keeping the right clients. Those are the ones who respect your expertise, they value your work, and they engage with your process. And sometimes, you know what? That means saying no to people or setting a boundary that might feel uncomfortable in the moment. But by doing this, it protects you in the long run, because the reality is this: every time you ignore a red flag in business or in life, in a relationship, you're usually agreeing to something you'll later wish that you hadn't. And every time you respond to one professionally, you're actually strengthening your business. So pay attention to what comes up early in that relationship. Okay. Trust your instincts. And remember, you're not just a stylist. You are a professional running a business. And when you're a professional running a business, you have those professional boundaries in place. That's it for today's episode. There's no real homework this week. I mean, just pay attention, keep your eyes and ears open for any of those red flags, and make sure to set those boundaries and feel okay setting those boundaries. So I hope this was helpful for you, and I will catch you next time. If you enjoyed today's episode of the Business of Style podcast, then don't forget to hit subscribe so you'll be notified when a new episode is available. And of course, if you're looking for additional training and resources to help you in your career as a personal stylist, then be sure to visit my website, styleacademyintl.com.